So over this season, there's usually several things that have to get done, right? There's the need to go buy all the food for the big Christmas feast. There's all the gifts that have to be bought for friends and family. There's all the extra decorations that you have to put up, whether if it's the tree, the outdoor lights. There's a lot of extra things that have to get done. Or maybe there's even a little extra traveling that you might be doing this year, going to see friends and family to have one big Christmas gathering. And if you're staying overnight, maybe you got to make sure that there's enough room for everyone, whether if you're hosting or even staying at a friend's house or family member's house. But also, on top of everything going on for Christmas, what's coming up a week after that is New Year's. And so there's all the things that have to get done for the upcoming year. There's the famous New Year's resolutions. Maybe there's trying to make sure all your tax stuff is all ready to go to send into the government. But that's also probably just your personal stuff. There's also everything going on with maybe your job. Maybe there's new things that have to go on there. Maybe there's like reports that you have to finalize to get done with because it's the fourth quarter. You got to finish up everything before the new year starts. There's all this running around and scrambling to get things done. Sometimes it feels like you have no control over these situations, that you don't have any power to even say yes or no, that the situation's already given you that answer, that you don't get a time to say yes or no. Or maybe there's some things that you are completely limited by. Maybe it's a year where there's not a lot of financial resources. Maybe because of your finances, you can't even get family members gifts, or maybe you can't even get your end of the year treat yourself gift. I remember back when I worked at the camp, I didn't really get a full day on Christmas Day off. I remember I would come in really late on Christmas Eve. I would say, "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad," going to bed because I would come in like around midnight, wake up, and then open gifts. And then I see family for like maybe a couple of hours. And then by 2 o'clock, I have to get back to the camp because I got to work the next day. There are times where this season, as great as it is, can sometimes make us feel powerless. Today, we're going to be continuing our Christmas series on the acronym SNOW. As each week, we're looking at a different letter. Last week, we looked at the letter S, which stood for Savior to Come. This week, we're looking at the letter N, which stands for Nativity. And so you probably have already guessed it, the Nativity, we're looking at the birth of Jesus. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So during this time, we've seen there's a lot of power being used here. There's great power, there's powerless, and then there's even the ultimate power. First thing we're going to be looking at is the power of Rome. That's our first point today. We're looking at the power of Rome during this time, who was currently controlling Israel this time, but not just Israel. See, the Roman Empire expanded quite a bit of the known world of the time. It was the greatest empire of this time frame. There was some local power, like local tribal leaders, like throughout the rest of the world, but the Roman Empire pretty much covered the entire Mediterranean Sea. It also controlled a little bit of northern Africa. It controlled a little bit of the Middle East, like Israel, controlled Europe. In fact, going all the way to what is modern day Spain and Portugal. That was considered, and all that was considered to be the known world. So, in a way, Rome controlled the world. That's how that they had great earthly power. And during this time, Rome would just say, you know what? Let's make a census this year. Now, a census is a time where people would need to like just take a head count of who's alive, who's dead. Number one, to make sure like just our records are up to date. But for Rome, it's particularly let's just raise the taxes. Let's just get more money. Now, sure, the taxes could have been used for like military usage, making sure that the roads, the construction was paid for, but it's also usually made so then Rome can just get richer and the poor can just get more poor. But also one of the struggles during this time is well, tax collectors were famous for increasing the amount of taxes each person would have to pay. For like Matthew, the tax collector, the disciple of Jesus, sometimes they would put on like a service charge. You know, like for modern day, you might see that on like when you go out to eat, you see a service charge. Well, that's what tax collectors would do. They would increase the taxes, and that would be like part of their salary. But for Rome, they wanted to make sure that number one, that who's alive and who's dead, but also to raise the taxes. Particularly, they wanted to raise the taxes on the living because if someone's dead, well, you're not going to be able to get taxes from them. It's been proven very hard to get money from a dead person. So he wanted to make sure that if you were alive, you were paying Rome. And that was the power of this time. They had great earthly power. It was the biggest empire of this time. They could control taxes. They would even control who lives and who dies. Rome has been known for just watching people die as a form of entertainment. The gladiator fights. If you remember those, there's even a movie about it called Gladiator. People would just even just watch people die as a form of entertainment. And even later on, use Christians as a form of entertainment to send them out to be killed by the lions. That's the type of power they had. But now we're shifting over to the power of Joseph. Now, Joseph, the famous husband to Mary, before him, when he found out about the census, well, during this time, he would have to travel to Bethlehem. That's the place he was born. That was the requirement of the census. Now, that might seem a little strange today, just because it's like, well, I can just go to my local government, like the courthouse, and just say, like, I'm here at this address. Here's the number of people in my household, and that's it. But during this time, people would have to travel to their birthplace. And so at this time, Mary and Joseph lived in Nazareth, which is in the northern part of Israel, in the Galilee region. And well, Bethlehem was in the south. In fact, it was actually a few miles south of Jerusalem. And in total, it's about 90 miles. Now, sure, for us, 90 miles is no big deal. We can drive that in maybe a few hours. Like now, just for a little reference for us, if we were to start walking, we would have to walk all the way to the Bean, that the famous landmark in Chicago. So if we walked there and walked back, that's about the same distance that Mary and Joseph would have to travel. But that's one way. For Mary and Joseph, their one way is for us going to the Bean and back. But also, this journey it's not easy. You see, Israel is not this flat country. It's not like this flat Israel or flat Illinois. Israel has a lot of hills and valleys, a lot of difficult terrain. And so the journey would be even more difficult. But also with Mary being pregnant, that would even be even more tougher, right? And it's not like, oh, she's maybe 1 or 2 months pregnant. She's about to give birth. Now, personally, I wouldn't want my pregnant wife to walk 90 miles, right, honey? You want to walk 90 miles? Yeah, I don't like even at 5 months pregnant, I don't want her to walk that much. But it's possible that Mary did walk all the way from Nazareth down to Bethlehem. Now, there's that famous account of, well, she probably rode on a donkey. Well, we don't have that in scripture. We don't have documentation that Mary rode on a donkey that we see like in like the little Christmas movies throughout the years. Like number one, maybe they got a camel, maybe they got a horse, maybe they got a cow. Like we don't know if Mary rode on anything. And so probably, and usually during this time, if they did have an animal, the animal would be used to carry your stuff because you don't want to carry like the heavy backpacks, all your luggage all the way to your destination. You would put it on an animal that could carry something of great weight. And so usually if you did have an animal, that would be like your luggage carrier. And there would most likely not be enough room for Mary to then sit on the animal. Now, and there's been discussion on how long the journey was. Some people would say, well, if Mary and Joseph traveled anywhere between 2.5 to 3 miles an hour for 8 hours, then they would have gone there within 4 days. But that's fast. That's like pushing it. And probably if Mary and Joseph did have a donkey that Mary rode on, that could work. But if they didn't, I'm thinking maybe they got there in about a week. But still a very long time. It was a very long distance. And for Joseph, he probably felt very powerless during this time. Because he's thinking, my wife is about to give birth. I got to be with her. And so I now have to travel all the way to Bethlehem. Like, I have no choice. Rome has required this census, and I have to go. And so, most likely, the reason why Mary went with Joseph was because, well, she's about to give birth, and Joseph didn't want to be away from her during this time. And also, during this time, he probably felt very powerless. Joseph felt even more powerless when they got to Bethlehem. Because what happened? There was no more room in the inn. Because of the census, everyone is traveling from everywhere. And so they're just staying there temporarily. And so it's like everyone's just getting in the hotel, and like now there's just no more place to stay. Now, one thing kind of interesting is that with Joseph, this is his birthplace. So maybe there was family. So maybe there was maybe a cousin or maybe an uncle that he knew that lived there. And so he says, hey, you know what? Here's our backup plan. We'll go to my cousin or uncle, maybe a family member. We'll talk to them, and maybe they can let us just stay for a few nights. But they probably got pushed away by family. Because if you remember, with Mary, she got pregnant out of wedlock. And so during this, now we understand today that it's like, well, she wasn't with another man, she's giving birth to the Son of God. But in this context, when Joseph, like when Mary just comes up and says, yeah, God says I'm having his son, everyone else wasn't fully convinced. And so what did it look like? It looked like Mary committed adultery. And so most likely the family down in Bethlehem that Joseph had would have probably said, no, we're not going to have your adulterous wife in our house. Because normally the penalty for adultery is being stoned. And no one wants to be associated with someone who deserves to be stoned at this time. And so Joseph, just trying to find something so his wife can be comfortable. As a husband with a pregnant wife, I've sometimes have felt powerless because there are times where when Marjorie is sleeping, she has to move a certain way in order to get comfortable. And sometimes she has to be in an awkward position in order just to get comfortable while being pregnant. And it's like, I want to help her out as much as I can, but there's only so much that I can do. And it's like, I even decided to go purchase a pregnancy pillow for her. And it's like, the research shows that it helps women who are pregnant to be comfortable while they're sleeping. So it's like, okay, I'll buy this. And and she's been using it. And she said she's felt comfortable. And it's like, that's great. But that hasn't like fully resolved the discomfort, which we know it's because she's pregnant. And so, but sometimes it just feels like I can't do anything. I can't help my wife. Now, if I'm feeling this helpless, like with my wife, even though she has a house, food, heat, like everything that is needed, if I felt this powerless, how does Joseph feel? He can't even find a place with a roof. All they can find is a stable, a barn, which the famous imagery of a stable is a small wooden structure, maybe with a camel or a donkey, a horse, maybe a cow. But it's probably that a stable during this time was a cave. And it didn't exactly smell like roses. But not only that, where did he lay this newborn baby? In a manger, a feeding trough for animals. You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if he just felt like, man, I'm going to get the award for worst father of the year. Can't even get the basic needs for my wife and child. However, even with all of this going on, God was still in control. Which comes to our final point, the power of God. Let's think about this. So, even though we talked about earlier, Caesar, the ruler of Rome, the Roman Empire, all this land was considered to be the world, who thought he had great power. There was one who had even more power. See, God used this census to fulfill his prophecy. Because we see in Micah chapter 5 that it was prophesied for the Messiah to be born in Bethlehem. So Caesar might be thinking, well, I'm getting rich. I'm a great ruler. Nothing can stand in my way. But God just said, thanks, dude. You're just helping me out. You're helping me fulfill my prophecy. Let's think about that. Rome helped pave the way for the coming Messiah. They didn't know it, but they were helping God out. And even though the place that Joseph found for Mary to give birth, now who knows? Maybe the innkeeper felt bad about not having more room, so he's like, "Well, okay, I have a stable in the back. You can go there." Or maybe he's just running around so much he looked over and it's like, "There's a stable. We're going there tonight. If someone owns it and we get in trouble, I don't care. You're about to give birth, Mary. We're going there." It was a roof over Mary's head. Now, sure, I wouldn't be surprised if Joseph said, "Lord, this is not what I wanted. I did not want a stable to be the place that my wife gave birth to your son, Lord. What was the point of all this? Why is my wife giving birth to the King of Kings in a stinky, dark stable?" But we look a little bit more further into Luke chapter 2. The shepherds were met by angels who told them that you'll find a baby wrapped in cloth lying in a manger. It was the identity of the manger that the shepherds were able to say, that's our sign. That's what we got to look for. And they found a baby lying in a manger. That was the sign that this is the Savior. No other child is laying in a manger but this one. Now, if we were to think maybe, like, what if Mary and Joseph did find a room? What if there was a place at the inn? Well, they would have to go door to door. Shepherds would have to go through, and maybe there was more than one inn. Who knows? And because of the census, everyone's coming in. So there's probably multiple hotels you got to check out. There's probably, and if you can't find them there, then it's like you got to then go door to door, and it probably would take all night. And who knows? Was Jesus the only baby born this night? I mean, if you go to a hospital, you might see a few babies be born on the same day. They might not be related to each other, obviously, but it's like maybe there was a baby down the hall that was also born. Now, obviously, I'm not sure if there were more babies. Maybe Jesus was the one and only baby born on that day. But the important thing is that it was a baby lying in a manger for the shepherds to find. So with God controlling all of this, he had the ultimate power. God is known as omnipotent. Omnipotent. Sorry, try to say that 5 times fast. Omnipotent. It means all powerful. Sorry, I can't talk this morning. Don't know why. Probably need some more coffee. See, we might look at life events and only see the bad situation. We might not be lying in a stable giving birth. And don't worry, honey, we got arrangements at the hospital for that, an actual hospital. Actually, she's the one who's been arranging all that. But even with all of this going on, all the inconvenience of Joseph and Mary having to travel and do a trip that they did not plan or wanted to do, only finding a stable to lay their heads. God was in control. Even through this terrible situation, God was still working through everything. Now, as we get to our application tonight, there's three things to remember. Number one is that no one has power over God. Rome felt like they had more power than anyone in the world. In fact, because of the known world at that time, they believed they were the only power in the world. Sometimes they even believed that Caesar is a god, or maybe not a god, but the god. Obviously, that's lowercase g, because no one has power over the one true God, the capital G, the greatest ruler. The second point of our application today is God's plan might not make sense in the moment, but it makes sense to God. As we talked about, there was no room in the inn for Mary and Joseph. There was an inconvenience trip, an unplanned or scheduled trip, but it all worked for God. There's probably a few things in our lives that we might not understand today. Even back at the camp, I was still trying to figure out, why am I here? Why am I doing this? Which then, summer of 2019, I met a lovely woman. She's sitting right there, front row. And so I might not have understood it at the beginning of my time there, but I've kind of understand it now. And then finally, God will always provide exactly what you need. We might look at different situations and be like, God, this is not what I asked for. Kind of like when you wake up on Christmas and all you find is a pack of socks. It's like you go back to your Christmas list. It's like, there's no socks on this list, Mom, Dad. But then you go up to my drawer and you find all the socks and it's like they're all worn out. And it's like, okay, I'm going to need some socks. They gave that to me for Christmas. In fact, last night, Marjorie and I attended the Stephen Curtis Chapman Christmas concert. And he told us a story of how back in the day when you wanted to like create a Christmas list, you would have to wait for the Sears catalog. Whereas today, all you have to do is just go onto Amazon and make a list. But during that time, what he even said that he would look through the Sears catalog and then he would rip out the page, circle the item, and stick it on the refrigerator and pray that Mom and Dad get the hint. And he told us the story about how one Christmas he told us that he doesn't know why he wanted this gift, but he wanted a rock polishing set. He didn't know why he wanted it, but he just said, you know what? The kid in the catalog looked happy and he just wanted to be happy too. That Christmas, he didn't get a rock polishing set. He got something a little different. He got his first guitar. And if you've listened to Stephen Curtis Chapman on the radio, I think that was a great gift. Which then he told us the story about that same Christmas, his older brother got a tambourine. And so he's happy that he got the guitar and not the tambourine, because I have a lot of songs with a tambourine as the major instrument. So it might not have made sense at that time, but it makes sense today that that was the gift that Stephen Curtis Chapman needed. And it makes sense today that Jesus was and is the gift that we all need. Let us pray.